Welcome back to Benchmark. Continuing our series on Budget 2012, we have with us today the Group Managing Director of Sunshine Holdings, Vish Govindasamy. In this exclusive interview, we discuss his expectations of the budget, our convoluted tax system, tax reforms, sectors that need assistance, and the impact of a possible global downturn. Here are excerpts. Thank you, Vish, for agreeing to be on Benchmark's Budget 2012 special. Welcome. Now, for years, Sri Lanka has been battling a convoluted tax system, and the corporate sector individuals have been screaming for reforms. Last year's fiscal budget, we saw some of those reforms coming in. Now, do you think there is more scope for streamlining and maybe unifying or grouping and simplifying the tax structure that is already now in place? Which areas do you think need a little more attention?
Savitri, thanks for having me on the show, and yes, it's a very valid question. After a long time, yes, we saw some consolidation and changes in the tax laws of this country, but yes, it is still complicated. It's not easy for somebody to understand this tax system, especially in the import tax. For import, you see there is PAL, there is cess, there is duty, etc. A lot of that can be combined into one if necessary. Even in the individual taxes, there are way too many slabs for individual. The idea should be to make sure every citizen of this country is a tax-paying citizen, and to do that, it has to be much easier for the person to understand and willing to pay the tax. Today's tax forms are very complicated. Even you need accountants to fill tax forms for you. If you look at the much developed countries, tax forms are done by individuals and now even online, and that's the way you must, that's the at least the place to get to in the future. And hopefully, I think with the recent things that they're doing, and I think there's a group set up to reduce the number of tax components, etc., and hopefully they'll get to that place soon.
So one of the deterrents could be that a regular citizen simply can't just sit down and fill in a tax return.
Absolutely. Now, if you take the US tax return, this very simple form is known as the 1040 EZ, but it's pronounced as EZ, and that's the whole idea, is to make it easier. The average citizen, it's just one page, 10 lines, and you fill it out and you have filed your tax return for the year. This way, every citizen is a tax-paying citizen, and that's the way we should get to.
So let's look at Budget 2012. Are you expecting the government to deliver more of the same this November? And if so, are we going to expect good news, and in what areas?
Well, there is a lot of expectation to be good news. We have come a long way from where we were last year, especially in the leisure industry. Our tourism has picked up. Businesses have generally picked up from last year, but I think there has to be some drastic incentives, changes in this year's budget. Last year we accepted what we got depending on what they were coming from, but I think this year overall we need to see some major changes, especially in the leisure sector, especially in the agricultural sector. This country needs to have food security. So we need to see major incentives in the agricultural sector. But for businesses to grow, I think the interest rate still can come down. I think the central bank is obviously doing its best to make sure the interest rates are kept below. But budget deficit, it's a necessary evil. We need to work towards that, and to do that, you need fiscal discipline. And I'm sure the government is working on that.
Now, Sri Lanka is trying to woo foreign direct investment, but unfortunately we don't seem to be meeting that mark, the target that we've set. Should there be more incentives, do you think, for foreign investment, and maybe a little more being done to improve the ease of doing business index?
I'm a controversial person when it comes to foreign direct investment. Yes, every country needs foreign direct investment. But I also feel those foreign direct investments must have the same playing field with the local investors. Just because you're bringing foreign investment doesn't mean we should just carte blanche open our hands to the investors. especially if they are in the same existing businesses the local investors have invested. There is no need to create competition with them by allowing incentives for the foreign investors. But if the investment is going to help the country as a whole, say for example a large infrastructure project, road building, logistics, those things I can understand. But just for an average business to come and start a business here, take advantage of our already existing this thing, I don't think why we should give great incentives to them. Even otherwise, let's say we give a tax break, there must be some requirement those tax breaks are reinvested, not taken back as profit outside. They must be reinvested so that it generates more employment. That's the way it should be.
So when you look at last year, Vish, in what areas did the budget actually fall short of your expectations, and do you think it will be addressed this time around?
It's hard to say it fell short. Remember, we were coming from a 30-year-old war, and I think last year's budget was the full-fledged new budget, I would say. There were a lot of, the more than falling short, it's the implementation of the budget that's an issue. We hear a lot of things in the budget, but then whatever is said in the budget should be implemented. I think that's where the issue is. So hopefully, you know, the powers to be will decide on a budget that will be actually executed.
Time for a commercial break, and when we come back, Vish Govindasamy voices his opinion on fiscal discipline, the SME sector, national debt and the burden on future generations. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. We now have more excerpts from our exclusive interview with Vish Govindasamy. So, are you seeing fiscal discipline at this point of time?
They're trying, let me put it that way. They're trying. That's the area I think the budget will have to address that on the fiscal discipline side.
Now, Vish, in the name of development, Sri Lanka has been borrowing, and I think our national borrowing, if we look at ourselves, we are up to our eyeballs, maybe even a little more. Look at our future generations. They are riddled in debt. Now, can you live with this rapidly increasing level of national borrowings? Is this all in the name of development? Is it a necessary evil? Do we have to live with it?
Remember, some of these borrowings have come at a cost of peace. We have fought a long and hard war for over 30 years, and that needed the type of borrowing to get to where we are. Okay, we have the peace now. Now we need to put plans in action. We have to probably borrow for the next 5-10 years. But more importantly than borrowing, what is important is a method to pay it back. And that will ease off the generations forward. I think that's what the future generation need to hear. How do we plan to pay our national debt? That's the issue. Borrowing is never the issue, as long as we have a solid plan to pay it back.
SMEs prop up a considerable segment of our economy, but I don't think they get the due recognition or the incentives that they deserve to continue in a sustainable manner. So do you think in the current context, SMEs do need more incentives? And if that's your opinion, what areas should we be actually concentrating on to get a competitive edge?
Personally, I think SMEs are the engine of growth for this country, and that's where we need to invest. And I don't think they're getting the best. They need a lot more advice. They need a lot more incentives. The sectors I think personally require probably in the fisheries area, probably in the dairy area, and a lot more in the agricultural area. Those are areas where the SME sector needs to be given one, technology, two, incentives, employment training, proper advice, consultancy on making their businesses grow.
What revenue generation measures do you think need to be introduced?
Yes, we need to come up with new revenue generations, but I also think a lot of waste management has to be put in place first. Duplication, waste management, and I think those things will automatically give us more revenue. But there are opportunities in revenue, especially in the tourism, leisure sector. maybe things like airport, the port, where again we have incoming tourists, where we can work on new methods of revenue. Our national parks are a great source of revenue. I think we are underselling our national parks. It's, you know, if you go to any other place in the world to enter such parks, it's you know, the charges are much higher. So there are opportunities in these areas, and still there is legislation that's blocking things to move forward, you know, in revenue generation. So we can do a lot more.
While Sri Lanka has been doing relatively well, the world has not been. The US and the Eurozone have been facing their own demons. We've been seeing possibly another financial crisis looming, probably on the same lines of the 2008 one. Do you think what is happening outside will actually influence the government's decisions on the budget?
It will, but I think what we need to look at is, see, the West is not having any growth. We are probably going to see another recession that is going to happen in the United States, even though people think it's otherwise. But Asia as a whole is growing. India, China are the places where we see growth, Sri Lanka. So we need to work closely with these nations where our export base shouldn't be dependent on the West. We need to be able to export to these countries where the growth is large. If our export bases are on the West where the growth is slowing, then you won't see our export base to grow. But globally, I think times are going to be a little difficult for, say, next 3 to 4 years, 5 years, until the West gets organized. So our budget, our fiscal planning, our fiscal discipline, all that needs to take into consideration what's happening in the West. And we here must make sure that we don't end up with another issue like one of the largest business houses in this country collapsed. Luckily, it was only 1 or 2. We need to make sure controls are put in, that type of thing doesn't happen.
That was Vish Govindasamy of Sunshine Holdings. The Voice of Business is up next, so stay with us.